Hey everyone, it's Motzie. We hope you've been enjoying this walk down memory lane, especially where we start revealing things that may not have been clear the first time around. And now that we're entering the next part of Act 3, it's imperative that you pay attention because there might be things that aren't as they seem. But in the meantime, please enjoy the last bit of the Act 3 official recap.
In episode 35.1, Paalam, or Goodbye, Elaine, Mary reads an undated entry from Elaine's journal. She talks about when Jay disappeared, some weeks after he left his Book of Elders to her for safekeeping. She finds his plan to create a focus to trap Bolden with, and cuts her own soul to do it, before presenting the plan to Dooley and Peter. Together, they trap and bury Bolden with Elaine's focus, and burn down his physical library. Elaine wonders what happened to Jay, and wonders where his cat, a black cat with yellow eyes, went. She eventually returns to the Puppet Master's old home, just to look at the Lori doll, and finds the automaton, reading from the Puppet Master's old notes, that it was meant to be William Savard II, Savard's son, but that it was impossible to bring him back to life once his soul passed on to the other side. It was also impossible for an automaton to hold a soul the way the human body could, even one as perfect as the one the Puppet Master built. Only gods could bring a soul back from the dead and store it where they saw fit. Only gods. The Puppet Master feared their patron finding out, but they died before he ever discovered their failure. Their patron was William Cornelius Savard I, the original leader of the Elders. The next recording has Evelyn in the miasma in Elaine's grave, trying to convince this part of Elaine's soul to let them go, so that they can use the Book of Elders to defeat them. But Elaine is unwilling to risk it. As they chat, Elaine explains how there's a little magic in every soul, as well as all of the land, and that she's comforted by the fact that nobody can control other people's souls except to keep them within the body that houses them, or force them to pass on. Eventually, Evelyn makes an ultimatum, that she would do as Elaine did, and cut a piece of her soul and place it in a focus to trap Bolden once again, should it come to that. Elaine agrees to her deal. She goes on to describe how Bolden found himself in a time loop of Elaine's making, eventually becoming aware of something wrong and rebelling against her power, but unable to break free, Elaine never responding to him. After all, to him, she was just an unconscious, unresponsive body from which to extract memories. And that was what she would remain to him, forever. Completely unresponsive. Mary finishes her reading by recounting a letter to Jay that Elaine never sent. She thanks him for saving her, letting her live her life outside the asylum, letting her discover her love for silly romance novels that he hated. She recounts how she eventually became a writer of silly romance novels, naming some leads after him, knowing that he'd hate it. She sees him as family, misses him, but assures him that she's living a happy, normal life, all thanks to him, hoping he'll read her romance novels one day. In the final scene, Elaine's soul in the focus breaks the miasma, trusting Evelyn to do the right thing, and Evelyn thanks her and bids her goodbye. In episode 36, Aklatan or Library Part 2, we hear a video interview with Guru Mahadev, Ashvin's public persona. While he mostly keeps it this act, he drops it for a moment when asked about his relationship with religion, talking about how, while belief is important, valuing any belief or imagination, as he calls it, religious or otherwise, over human life is dangerous. We then hear a call between Mary and Nanai, where she talks about how her friends comforted her, while she grieved the losses she experienced during Halloween. She goes into detail about Ashvin, and how, despite his Guru Mahadev persona, he's a loving person who does everything for his friends, and wishes to take care of and heal people at the end of the day. The next call has Mary talking about the planned visit to Elaine's grave, which she technically wasn't invited to, but that she's on standby for, in case anything goes wrong. Following this is a tape recording, where Mary, strangely enough, is interviewing Ashvin to understand what happened to him that night. The night they were trapped in the miasma at Elaine's grave. Ashvin briefly expresses his paranoia around the tape recorders, wondering if anyone might be able to listen to them. He goes on to explain how he and Evelyn entered a horrific library and got separated after he set the books on fire. Next thing he knows, he's speaking to Clifford Bolden, who attempts to convince Ashvin he's a good man, but Ashvin is wary from the start, noting Bolden's desperation under the surface. They play nice, Ashvin trying to find a way to break the miasma, while Bolden explains how he'd been trapped, and how he tried everything to talk to the woman who trapped him. But she never responded to him. However, when Ashvin begins to pray, as he's begun doing more often after meeting Mary, Elaine speaks to him, making him promise to protect Evelyn if she decides to release the miasma, and all of them with it. In the following recording, we hear a struggle between Ashvin and Bolden, with Bolden attempting to squeeze the life out of Ashvin. Ashvin yells at Evelyn to go get help, but Bolden casts a spell in her direction, and she screams. Ashvin reaches out with magic to save her, and Bolden takes advantage of his distraction and attacks him, only for shotgun fire from a mysterious fourth party to interrupt their struggle. In episode 37, Ebig, or Yearning, we open on Donner on a call with his nan on a payphone in the mid-2000s. Donner hears a groan and goes to check on someone, talking to what seems to be a homeless person about the coming snowstorm. The surprisingly young person is fully against going to a shelter, so Donner helps him up to bring him somewhere safe. Despite his mistrust, the young man reveals his name, Rick Murphy. The next scene is a phone call between Murphy and Ashvin, sometime during their relationship before the events of Halloween. Ashvin calls Murphy while drunk, and the conversation goes from silly drunken ramblings on Ashvin's end to a much more serious topic, the fact that Murphy is hopelessly in love with Donner. Murphy's averse to discussing it, but Ashvin surprises him by saying he doesn't really have a problem with it because he knows Murphy loves him sincerely. His biggest problem stems from noticing how Murphy appears not to know how to exist beyond acts of service, seemingly unable to see his own worth outside of what he can do for others, including in his relationships with Donner and Ashvin. It's a damning observation, but Ashvin ends the call with light-hearted ribbing, and Murphy attempts to say he loves him, unsuccessfully, instead telling him to call him if he needs to take him home. Ashvin takes his meaning regardless, and says he loves him too, in his native Mauritian Creole. The following recording happens in a quiet hospital room, where Donner awakens and Mary gives him water, saying the doctors drugged him to the gills for his injuries. She surprises even awake and assures him that everyone's okay, that everyone survived the night. She feels guilt, however, for not getting to him in time, since she and Laura thought Murphy would go to him first, so they prioritized Ashvin and Evelyn. Donner thanks her regardless for saving him, falling back into unconsciousness. She only reveals that she didn't save him after he's already asleep, and that she has no idea who did. In the next scene, in a reversal of the roles, Mary interrogates Murphy, trying to get his side of the story. She assures him Donner's okay, though she's unsure why Murphy didn't go to him first. Not accusatory, just curious. though Murphy seems disturbed by his own choice as well. She brings up his dislike of her, which he denies, not dislike, just distrust, of how dangerous she is. She reminds him he's the only one who's seen her deepest fear. The insects they both ran into in episode 3, when they went to rescue Laura. Though, she clarifies, she's not much afraid of the bugs, as she is who sent them. Murphy seems racked with guilt by his choice, but Mary reminds him he saved Ashvin and Evelyn, revealing he was the one who came with a shotgun in their struggle against Bolden. She just wants to understand what happened. She relates Murphy's feelings for Donner, both of them being in love with him, though Murphy bitterly calls his love an obsession. They make a deal to trade answers, and Murphy asks Mary why she loves Donner. She reveals that while many of these feelings formed after they fought the Cold Ghost together, she also feels that Donner is so distant, so disconnected from her romantic feelings, when he seems so knowledgeable of everything else, that it feels safe to love him, knowing he would never look at her the same way, even if it hurt just a little. Murphy seems to relate to that feeling, and reveals his history with Donner, that he owed him for saving his life, that he was once homeless and Donner sheltered him, helped him get back on his feet and get clean. He only went into the force so he could support Donner and become his partner. Donner and his loved ones were Murphy's only family. Mary asks why Ashvin said he was visiting family, and Murphy reveals his younger brother wanted to meet him after a decade of disconnection, that his brother wanted to come live with him in the city, which he was meant to discuss with Ashvin before tonight. Mary offers him help and comfort if he needs it, and Murphy's grateful, revealing to her that rather than hating her like she believed, he actually loves her, like family, which Mary is shocked by. She's one of his people, after all, like Donner, Ashvin, Laura, and even Evelyn. He reveals how, for 15 years, his only people were Donner and his loved ones, and that his nonchalance around the supernatural stemmed from his utter trust in Donner and his own lack of self-worth. He formed almost no identity beyond what he believed he owed Donner. Mary wonders what Donner thinks of this, and Murphy doesn't believe he knows, because otherwise he'd have known all this time exactly how empty Murphy was. It was easy for Murphy to decide to go to Donner when he got the call from Laura, so it shocked even him when he went to Ashvin and Evelyn instead. He was devastated when he saw Mary's text. Ambulance, Donner down. He thinks he should have gone to him, spiraling in his grief. But Mary breaks him out of it, ordering him to ask her a question as part of their deal. He questions why she's so different from Ashvin, from other elders, and she says she doesn't know, that her tatay or father died before he could tell her. She thinks about how her shaman nanay or mother has different gods from her, which makes no sense. Nanay's gods being Bisaya and hers being Tagalog. It makes even less sense when considering her Tagalog father was a devout Catholic who never prayed to his ancestral gods. She rambles, but it seems to help Murphy calm down from an oncoming panic attack, and the confusion does indeed help him. They begin to wind down the discussion, and Murphy asks if she's already talked to Ashvin. She has, sadly informing Murphy that he really hurt him, to which he responds, "I know." The final recording takes place after Murphy saves Ashvin and Evelyn. Evelyn hurriedly tells Murphy to find Bolden's focus on his body, which houses the last piece of his soul, which keeps him in the living world, and Murphy destroys it with a shotgun blast. Desperately, Murphy looks Ashvin over to make sure he's okay and finally says he loves him so much. Ashvin reciprocates with an "I love you" of his own, before Murphy says they should break up. Ashvin is dumbfounded. In episode 38, Sinungaling or Lies, Mary interviews Donner in the hospital room about going to the necropolis without backup. She asks why he didn't call her. He explains that there was interference. When she asks if he found what he was looking for, the pocket watch, he lies and says he saw nothing. In a recording of Donner finding the William crypt, Donner meets Pocket, picking her up as he enters the grave. He seems to understand what she's saying, and wins her trust after mentioning Rosario, receiving the pocket watch directly from the cat. Instead of leaving, however, he intuits that she's the only thing keeping the headless spirit in the crypt from getting out, and enters the grave, intending to handle it with Pocket's help. In the next scene, Evelyn's just finished reviewing Mary's records on Jay's notes, mentioning that she sent Laura to fetch the Book of Elders, hidden in Elaine's memorial as a fairly successful romance novel author. She even read one of Elaine's spicy romance books, happy she found joy after the horrors of Hyde. Evelyn wants to record the entries from the Book of Elders, which she's already skimmed, but she wants Mary to look it over first, just in case. Mary enters just as Evelyn's blaming herself for Ashvin getting hurt and being left with Clifford Bolden's mark, 2 handprints around his neck. Mary ensures the book is safe, but nonetheless wants Evelyn to stay out of future cases for her safety. Evelyn refuses, given her role in her promise to Elaine, and Mary backs down. But out of a suspicion Ashvin planted in her head surrounding the recordings they've been making, decides to do the recording in Evelyn's place. Mary reads about Richard Henry, right hand to the Order's original leader, Savard, before becoming right hand to the benefactor, so ordinary-looking that many identified him by his high collars and fine cufflinks. His own wants and goals were never as clear as his loyalty and service to powerful men, and it's implied strongly that not even the benefactor knows his goals. The next scene returns to Donner's story, switching between his account to Mary and the actual tape recording he captured. He mostly tells the truth, but intentionally avoids mentioning Pocket at all. He finds a pit with round stairs leading down to a circle of symbols at the bottom, recording them manually when he can't take photos. Pocket leads them through dark tunnels to a room with old occult machinery, similar to what they found in the Gargantua in episode 24 Ilalim. There, Donner finds a headless body with a dried pool of blood, and though it looks decades old, he smells fresh rot, and the headless ghost manifests and goes after him. Even in fleeing, Donner notices details. The body wore a high-collar suit and seemed to have fine cufflinks. He doubles back after a chase and destroys one cufflink, taking a terrible injury to his side before he destroys the other with his gun. He struggles to get back to the entrance, but once there, he's confronted by Richard Henry, who throws him against a wall and knocks him out, and deactivates a weakened Pocket. He says he could never get into the crypt because of powerful wards, and that he tried to lead Dooley there, but Dooley could somehow never find the entrance. He calls Donner Michael, and as he's about to do something terrible, faint, familiar whistling is heard from the entrance. Richard Henry seems shocked to see the newcomer, and seems terrified as he cries for them to wait before the recording is cut off. None of this is relayed to Mary. Donner only remembers passing out at the entrance, then waking up in an ambulance with Mary looking at him like he died. Mary seems to hold something back, and when Donner challenges her about what she saw, she challenges him back, both catching the other in a lie, but neither willing to admit it. When Mary leaves the room and the tape recorder for Donner to review, Pocket emerges, safe for now, hiding from anyone other than Donner. In the final portion of Donner's recording, the night he entered the William Crypt, an unknown voice is heard, calling Donner Dear One as he's laid on the grass outside the crypt, talking about how he's grown. The stranger also calls Donner Michael as they depart, disappearing just as a terrified Mary calls Donner from afar, running to check on him and calling an ambulance. In episode 39, Tanda, or Elder/Record, Mary talks to Nana about her powers and how Donner is definitely lying to her, and how she spoke to his mentor Dooley, learning his nickname, Mikey, but that his real name, still unknown, is definitely not Michael. She briefly tells something else to shut up, as she mentions the name Michael. She then goes on to explain how, because she's able to feel sense memories of objects, she notices when there's an absence of sense memories, which she's noticed in both Jay's Book of Elders, as well as something in Donner's hospital room, Jay's pocket watch, though she doesn't know that's what it was yet. While she knows Donner is lying, she also knows she lied to him, letting Donner think she saved his life at the necropolis when instead, someone else did. a figure in a black coat touching Donner's face, who disappeared into shadow as soon as she arrived. A figure whose face she can't remember. Despite Donner's descriptions, she isn't able to see the William Crypt's entrance, only able to go inside by ignoring illusory walls. She explores everything Donner saw, taking notes and intending to bring them to CJ or Vanessa. When she touches the now safe headless corpse for sense memories, she notes emotions. Joy and love, then heartbreak, then nothing. An incomplete picture by design, like the body's missing head. Mary then relays the sense memories from Jay's belongings, which he left with Dooley. Attraction, love, protectiveness, then urgency and fear, then familiarity. Mary and Dooley ask CJ for the truth, and she admits that Jay fled Toronto because he was afraid of something, or someone, and asks CJ to protect his loved ones and companions. CJ cast protections on Dooley, Jay's parents, and Elaine, but she couldn't find Peter. She sent Jay letters via a P.O. box in the USA, but hardly ever received responses, except for when Jay asked her to attend his father's funeral, and asked her to keep writing when she began to doubt he was receiving her missives. When she asked him if he would ever come back, all he said was, "He is not yet dead." She last sent him a letter months ago, but plans to send one after everything's happened. And Dooley asked her to tell Jay that he wants to see him. Mary asked her to write a small postscript for her, reading B or RH ? After Dooley goes to rest, Mary asks CJ about the Book of Elders, and she admits she contributed some knowledge to his writing, and knew he received information from Clifford Bolden, as well as a secret elder ally she didn't know. Mary tells her what she learned from the Book of Elders, that Jay's secret ally was in fact their original leader, who disappeared for almost a century. William C. Savard himself. The following recordings have Mary reading entries from the Book of Elders. She reads about the spells Richard Henry developed, then moving on to the benefactor, who developed more spells than anyone else in the Ordo, apart from Marianne Weeks. She lists over a dozen spells he either invented or perfected, before skipping to his story according to Jay. He was, by many accounts, an underestimated member of the Elders due to his well-meaning nature. His ruthlessness only came to light when he helped murder Goody-Goody, Renard, and Langford in cold blood without hesitation. Despite this, he mostly focused on the study of magic, and seemed to sincerely believe in Savard's ideals, which he himself would eventually abandon, making the world a better place with magic, a benefactor through and through. After Savard's disappearance, the benefactor came to power with his knowledge and mastery of many spells, despite his well-meaning nature. He gained a reputation among elders for punishing those who stepped out of line, which Jay notes frightened Clifford Bolden in particular. Jay then mentions how his elder friend did not know the benefactor anymore, but worries about a man who holds such immense power, believing himself to be good. Finally, Mary reads Savard's entry, cataloging his historical role as a huge contributor to Toronto's construction, well respected in all aspects, with his only quirk being an interest in the supernatural. It mentions his wife, Elizabeth Brown, and their son, William Jr., and his friendship with the Weeks family. His son growing up with the Weeks siblings, Mary Ann and John Isaac. Savard began the Order as a philanthropic endeavor, with Mary Ann believing in a better world until Savard's true nature made her quietly rebel. He had a narrow view of what goodness was, and believed that those who did not contribute to the betterment of society ought to be eradicated, a belief exacerbated by the Great Depression. When Mary Ann died, he enacted his plan and burned down the ward, a section of Toronto that was crowded with immigrants and the impoverished, to empower something called the Godhead. Afterwards, he abdicated and disappeared, never activating his machine. It's later revealed that his son, William, had died the same night. After Savard Sr.'s disappearance, there was a power vacuum, and the elders splintered into factions. Mary is unable to complete her reading due to a missing page, ripped out, the page Michael had in the St. Patrick's case, which inspired him to mark Savard as his God, and to copycat elder murders to become his archangel. Mary flips to another entry called The Vagrant, describing a man who's wandered Toronto streets for decades. According to this entry, some witnesses speak of his benevolence in the dark and cold, while others fear him for burning down houses, possibly with people still inside. Both of these descriptions involve his use of fire, just like Savard's. In the final scene, Mary calls Vanessa, saying she'll come over so they can prepare for the meeting with the other elders. And in episode 40, Bulong, or Meeting, a tape recording opens on Mary waking up in a strange, echoing place, after the meeting has already taken place. She prays to Anagolay, the Tagalog goddess of lost things, and finds she's underground, only then realizing that the tape recorder she had with her is still running. She wonders aloud if anyone's listening to her, and decides nonetheless to keep a record in case something happens. She recounts the night's events, infiltrating the elders' meeting, wearing a glamour that makes her look and sound like Vanessa Bartolotti. She avoids outright saying that Vanessa is assisting her directly, feeding information into her ears and speaking directly from her mouth, though it's confirmed in a separate recording that Vanessa is actively assisting Mary in getting a direct meeting with Richard Henry. Mary challenges Vanessa's belief that the benefactor is secretly Savard, and while Vanessa doesn't argue, she reveals why both men frighten her regardless. The fact that Savard wanted to use his machine to create a god, to make the world better, attempting to empower it with hundreds of fear deaths, and the fact that the benefactor seems to want to do the same thing, possibly refining the process. When Mary asks Vanessa why she doesn't want to use the power from the hole the Bartolottis blew in reality that she keeps in her garden shed, Vanessa explains it's too unstable and powerful for her to harness, so all she can do is contain it. Back in the underground, Mary recounts meetings with other elders in a mansion near Casaloma, including Minerva the Cannibal from episode 19, Martin Knowles, a man with a spectral hand who was nearly killed by an ancient artifact that he unearthed in the long winter, Claudia, an elder who fully embraced drinking blood after a mortal man buried her alive, believing her to be a vampire, Manfred, a paranoid elder with self-inflicted scars of numbers and symbols, who believes his apprentice wishes to kill him, and Vincent LaBelle, a sly elder with dark round glasses, hiding his missing eyes. They all convene in a dinner hall that's reminiscent of a jazz club, with a stage in front, and Mary spies Patience Glass, an ordinary accountant and elder with ties to English nobility. Richard Henry speaks to the dozens of elders in attendance from the stage, reminding them of how their magic will be unpredictable during the long winter, and how new threats have arisen or resurrected in the last year, including the returned George Langford, and the natural users attempting to hunt them down. He gets a reaction when he mentions that their powerful enemies, including the puppet master, might return as well. And while the benefactor isn't currently in attendance, Richard Henry speaks of his plan in motion, to ensure all their compatriots receive a nigh-endless supply of power, to protect them from their enemies, and empower them further, so long as they survive this incoming harsh, long winter. After dinner, Mary as Vanessa meets with Richard Henry one-on-one, and Richard Henry reveals that he, and by extension the benefactor, have discovered the tear in reality that Vanessa's hiding behind her home. Mary tries to get him to elaborate on the benefactor's plans, but he's tight-lipped. In that moment, her deception goes out the window, when she sees Richard Henry employ his signature spell, the spectral red hand, to fetch himself a drink, and Mary recognizes it from the night Laurie killed 5 people, the red hand animating her and giving her new life. The rage, terror, and grief overtakes Mary, and her immense power reveals itself as she stands. Her shadow grows, and the glass cases in the room shatter, and a terrified Richard Henry takes off running when he realizes who he's dealing with. Mary's account is cut off when someone enters the room she's in, and she greets Cornelius at the door. She now knows he's the Elder's original leader, William Cornelius Savard Sr., and knows he's not the benefactor, so she asks if he would be an ally. At first, Cornelius seems to be a threat, his own frightening and oppressive magic filling the room, before he eases off and tells Mary to follow him. In episode 41, Danny Boy, the Pride episode. Well, you'll have to find out next week, as we end our official recap and go into the rest of Act 3. But we do have some things to say about certain upcoming episodes.
In Danny Boy, our 2024 Pride episode, a trans man named Danny Boyd recounts his harrowing experience being targeted by a powerful focus, mutated by love, and how his life and family were saved by the mysterious vagabond, Cornelius. Thank you so much for listening to these recaps, and if you'd like to support our work so we can keep making Hainai, please do consider supporting our Patreon. We work hard not only on these regular episodes you listen to, but on bonus episodes as well, which go up on the Patreon at the $10 at the tier. Our upcoming June bonus episode, Coppelia, a Hainai short story, centers on the puppet master, Drosselmeyer, and their relationship with their adopted daughter, Lori, and how a comedic ballet story inspired her to turn the residents of her hometown of Hyde into an army of living dolls. If that's something that interests you, go sign up to our Patreon. We've got a bonus episode coming out every month now. You can also enjoy our regular episodes in early access at any tier, starting from the $3 Nenet tier. It'll really help us out and get you some amazing bonus content. And as always, thank you, we love you, and hanggang sa muli.
You're listening to Hainai by Motzie Dapul.